Well, in case my instructions weren't coming through in pantomime, thankfully we've got everything written here on the screen. If you've ever used a Zoom whiteboard before, go ahead and type an answer in the orange box and show off your skills. And if you haven't used a Zoom whiteboard before, this is your chance to give it a try. Nope. Oh, you drew that freehand too. That's some serious graffiti skills. That's great. There's a couple of other neat tools in here. You found the stamp tool. Stamps are one of my favorite. You could do all sorts of fun exercises with stamps. I was using the text tool to create all these text boxes. And you can use those to write in the box as well. Yeah, I see some text showing up. Now for advanced tech formatting, we've got this little format button. And it takes a little bit of figuring out to know when to hit the format button and when to hit text, but you can change the size and the color of your text and your shapes. Well done. Well, now that is a false answer. Saying no, I haven't no longer applies because now you have. Yeah, Feline, I know you don't have a more function on yours because more is something that you use in iPads. And so I'm providing directions for people who are on different devices. But were you able to access the annotation toolbar? Yeah, great. Okay. Yes, Jason, you can enable annotations, but somebody has to be sharing a screen for you to annotate. And the host can say, nobody can share a screen but me, or anybody can share a screen. And there's actually like an open gap in permissions for sharing that I'll get to in a little bit. You can graffiti people's slides if you want to. And there's currently no real way to stop that from happening, which is fun. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, team.
We're just playing around with a little bit with a whiteboard until we get started. Have you ever used a whiteboard in Zoom before?
In one of Melissa's courses, I think they did with you, we played with whiteboards.
Oh, great.
That is the extent of my knowledge.
Well, go ahead and give the text tool in the whiteboard a try and give us some graffiti in the orange box.
You say that like I know where my Zoom toolbar is.
There's some instructions over here on how to
Thank you.
open the annotation toolbar. Nice. Yeah, those arrows are really fun. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, so I'll give just a couple of minutes for people to get started. And Jason, I appreciate these questions you're putting in the chat box. So if anybody else has questions that you'd like me to cover today, be sure and drop them in. Can you edit an annotation or just delete it if you don't like it? If you select an annotation and you use that first button on the annotation toolbar and select it, you can change the formatting. And so you can change the color and the size of the font. If you want to change the text in the annotation, the text tool won't do it. So if I use my text tool and I click on my headline, it's just going to say, oh, you want to do a new text box. But if I use the select tool and I click on the text and double click on it, then I can get into this text box. And then I can add things. I mean, sorry about that. So if you use the select tool, you can make modifications. You don't see the select tool. It should be to the left of text, the first one on your annotation toolbar. Oh, is it called mouse on yours? Interesting. Wow. How funny. It might be because I'm the host and you're attendees, or it might be because we have different Zoom permissions. Oh, and it doesn't select. I think that's because you're not the host. Can't seem to change anything. Yeah, you can delete your drawings. And as the host, I can delete everybody's drawings. And there's this clear button. And so I can clear all drawings, my drawings, or the viewer's drawings. And so this is really handy if, you know, I create all this infrastructure for us to collaborate on a whiteboard, and then I want to clear viewers' drawings. Then I can clear everybody else's and keep everything on here. And I can't undo it to bring them back. I can clear all the drawings so that, boom, we're in a blank whiteboard. And then we can start over from scratch, or we can just get into the slides, which is really what I'd like to do today. Oh, and can I, as a host, move your drawings? Geez, I don't know. Let's figure that out real quick before I jump into the presentation. Somebody pop a drawing on there, and I'm going to try and drag it and move it somewhere else. All right. I can move your stuff. Can anybody else move these with the mouse tool? Interesting. Okay, so this is just a host privilege. Got it. Ah, that was really fun. I like diving into the mechanics of Zoom. This is really fun. And so we're going to do a lot of this deep dive today. And I'm going to share my slides, and we'll go over a quick agenda of what we're going to talk about today. Here we go. Okay, so this is going to be a small group today because I didn't go through a big promotion campaign because, as I'm sure you've noticed, the world is on fire, and it didn't really feel comfortable to me to go out and tell everybody, hey, join this masterclass. So I appreciate all of you coming and showing up today and sharing this space with me. It really means a lot. Today's presentation is called Remote Culture, Communication, and Collaboration. And that's the agenda for what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about these three things: remote culture, remote communication, and remote collaboration. And as so often happens with creative work, it's usually about halfway through the production of something that you realize what it's really about. And it wasn't until I was about halfway through creating this presentation that I realized what this is really about is remote connection. At the intersection of these three topics we're going to talk about today, of culture, communication, and collaboration. In the overlap of these three, that's connection. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is how to facilitate connection with your communities and your cultures that you connect with online. Because with the world the way it is right now, we're focusing on a specific subset of these ideas. Remote culture, remote connection, and remote collaboration. These have really different applications in the modern world. And remote connection is something that we all need to cultivate if we want to maintain strong communities. One of the biggest problems with remote work is loneliness. I've been working remotely for 10 years, and I talk with a lot of other remote workers. A lot of my clients work on distributed teams. And the number one problem that people face when they're working from home is loneliness. Does anybody here ever deal with loneliness? Can I see a show of hands if you've ever felt lonely working in your job or with your position? Yeah? Yeah. Great, Feline, give me some applause. Great, thank you for that, Feline. Yeah, if anybody knows how to use reactions, you can also use reactions tab if you don't want to raise your hand manually like some sort of savage. We can do this digitally now. And we have all these cool tools and we can do all this fun stuff, but we get lonely. And the best way that I know of to combat loneliness is to stay in constant communication with our remote cultures. Mark Sanborn likes to say, in teamwork, silence isn't golden, it's deadly. It's deadly to the culture, it's deadly to your relationships, and it's deadly to your understanding of what's actually going on. So here's some of the things we're going to talk about today. I'll share with you some best practices for cultivating culture across continents. We'll talk about virtual meetings and the importance of regular reports. We'll talk about how to communicate clear boundaries with your team and your family. And then we're going to demonstrate some different whiteboarding techniques. That the whiteboard we did at the beginning was just a teaser. We're going to take you through a couple of different whiteboarding techniques because I found that these are really effective for cultivating relationships and creating clear communication. I'm also going to give you a copy of the Zoom host checklist. And this is a PDF that goes through in detail the best practices for launching and hosting a good Zoom meeting. And if you're watching this on the replay, there should be a button somewhere nearby. But for those of you watching this live, I'll drop this in the chat box before the end of the presentation. And I'll also send it out via email with the replay. So this is one of my cultures. This is a group of people that I haven't seen in 20 years. But 20 years ago, we attended a small physical theater school in Blue Lake, California, called Del Arte. And we were in an intensive physical theater program. And last month, we got together on Zoom. And we got to relive that culture. We got to communicate with each other and pick up right where we left off. The tech didn't get in the way. The tech helped us to have the same level of communication and engagement that we had before. And our cultures are important to combating loneliness, to creating progress on our projects and on what matters most to us. And we all belong to a bunch of different cultures. You know, this is one of my extracurricular cultures. They're people that I enjoy talking with because we have shared experience together. But I also belong to cultures for teams that I manage or clients that I interact with or professional organizations of people who do similar things to what I do. And those cultures all take regular communication. And so I'm curious to know about your cultures. What's the biggest culture that you interact with online nowadays? Go ahead and type in the chat box. Is it your work or place of employment? Is it a community organization? Go ahead and type in the chat box and let me know who your most important culture is right now. Who do you interact with the most as a group online? Okay. We've got a lot of work happening, business teammates. Yeah. I'm finding that our work cultures are becoming the most important interactive relationships that we have in remote work. Clients and peers. Yeah. Yeah. These are the remote cultures where we spend most of our time outside of our bubble. If you're still in quarantine right now, there's this bubble of your family and maybe a friend or a loved one, but the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. Virtually, it's our work teams where we get most of our interaction, where we get most of our fulfillment for community. When we had offices, it was easy. You could bump into somebody at the water cooler and say, hey, that thing you were doing, how's that going? And an unexpected conversation could deepen a relationship. This is really challenging in a world of remote work because all of our conversations are intentional. You knew that you were going to show up today. It was on your calendar. It was intentional that you were going to be here. But those spontaneous conversations, we've lost those. When Barack Obama was interviewed by Jerry Seinfeld on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, Jerry said, what do you miss the most about your pre-presidential life? And he said, you know, I miss walking down the street and bumping into you and saying, hey, Jerry, how are you doing? How's it been going? As president, everything in his life is scripted. Every interaction is scheduled in advance and vetted by a team. Those spontaneous conversations that you get at the water cooler, he didn't have those, and neither do we. There's some ways you can manufacture that spontaneity. In Slack, they have the Donut app, where you can have a random 30-minute coffee with somebody on your team. Some of the virtual conference platforms have a network button where you're paired with a random attendee and with a 4-minute timer in a 2-person breakout room. And so we can create some of the spontaneity, but it's no longer part of our infrastructure. It's not part of the physical culture around us anymore. The best we can do is bring people together and ask for them to join us. And so take a moment and think about beyond your main work culture. Who else is in your culture? Who have you not been communicating with over a distance that you'd like to spend more time with? Great question, Jason, about online conference apps. I don't have anything in this presentation because that's a whole big conversation, but stick around at the end. I'll be available for Q&A at the end, and I've got plenty to say about online conference apps. When we're creating a culture, when scientists are in a lab, they use a petri dish. They create a controlled environment and then introduce specific changes into that environment to cultivate the culture that they want. And this is something that we can do with our online cultures. You could look at this Zoom interface as a petri dish. For the next hour, we have a culture here among us. And if I introduce different ideas, if I say, hey, everybody take yourself off of mute and tell me one thing. If I say, hey, everybody type in the chat box and tell me one thing. Or if I stop presentation mode and say, okay, we're going to open up to discussion and I want to hear your thoughts on things. Those are all introductions to the culture. They change the culture. And that's something that we can do with our remote teams. Remote relationships are more than just a hierarchy of authority. It's not just you and your boss. It's not just you and your coworkers. It's not just you and other members of an organization. You're also humans. And if you spend the time to allow other people to be a human, then you get a chance to connect with their humanity. Just saying, hey, how are you doing? How are all the changes affecting you? How are you handling everything? Sometimes before getting into the meat of a meeting, having a few minutes to have this conversation, it helps unload the burden of going through things yourself. On a really basic level, there's two kinds of cultures. There's proactive cultures and reactive cultures. Proactive cultures are the ones that say, I choose to do this. And reactive cultures say, I have to do this. And there's better and worse versions of both of these. Your culture could be adaptive, able to modify itself for change that happens, or it could be passive, where it doesn't want to make any change. It wants to let things happen to it. Adaptive cultures say, I'm learning to do this. And passive cultures say, I can't do this. The worst kind of culture is destructive, when people say, I won't do this. And oftentimes it's best to just leave destructive cultures, because there's plenty of groups of people in the world that you can spend your time with. But sometimes cultures are worth saving. Sometimes you want to move your culture up this ladder. So if you had to identify where your main culture is, go ahead and type it in the chat box and let me know, is your primary culture that you interact with online, is it proactive or is it reactive? Is it adaptive or is it passive? Great, Feline's in an adaptive culture. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Jason's got a positive culture. Sarah's is proactive. Lisa says, I think it's proactive, but it could always change. And it could change for better or worse. One of the ways that we can move cultures up this ladder is by modeling the behavior of a higher level. If you're in a reactive culture where people are saying, I have to do this, model the behavior of, I choose to do this. Ask people, if you could do anything in this, what would you choose to do? Ask your culture, what are you learning to do this week? If you could improve yourself in any way, what would you learn to do? And by introducing these changes into the Petri dish, you're going to improve the culture over time. So now that we've had an overview of culture, I'd like to move on to communication. Because how we modify the culture is through the medium of our communication. And communication is a lot more important now that we're all online. Because the communication that you provide for your team members and for your remote relationships, this gives them a pulse of what to expect from you. And that pulse is critical to understanding what's happening next and what options people have for the future. And I find these pulses are best expressed through regular reports. Communicating with daily, weekly, or monthly reports is the easiest way to provide that pulse. When you work in an office together, you can sense the mood when you come in every day. You might have a weekly stand-up meeting where you can communicate about what's going on. But when we're working remotely, we have to craft these sorts of interactions. And I use this chart when I'm analyzing an organization and helping them fix what's going on. If they're having a problem with production, with the work getting done, then I institute a daily plan. People just have to send an email to their direct reports or their immediate supervisor saying, this is what I plan to do today. And just that simple act, this is what I'm going to do today, this is my plan, it helps people organize their thoughts and activity so that the production gets done. If a team is dealing with lots of problems, sending a weekly review around to all the stakeholders helps provide the space and the context to analyze what's been going on and to deliver updates on what changes have been made, what's been tried, what the results were. And so if you're facing deficiencies in any of these 6 areas, consider a regular report at one of these intervals. This is the sort of environment change that can change a culture. And the communication is the medium through which we do it. When we were in an office, your boss could see if the work was getting done just by looking over your shoulder. We don't have that capability anymore when we're working remotely. It's kind of a good thing. True, Jason. However, it also makes people wonder, is the work really getting done over there? Are they just sitting at home surfing on Facebook? Are they even doing the work? Some of the best professional relationships I've had is when people just send a quick email at the end of the day with a short bullet list. This is what I worked on today. Boom, boom, boom. That regular pulse lets people know that even if we're not communicating every day, even if I don't see you on a video call more than once a week or once every 3 weeks, because you're getting that short digest of activity, you know what's going on. Jason Fried, the founder of Basecamp, calls this one of the secret benefits of using remote workers, that the work itself is how your performance is judged. And personally, I prefer the work being how I'm judged on my performance. Because when you're working in an office politics can sometimes be the yardstick by which you're judged. Does anybody in here hate office politics? Can I see some hands or some reactions? If you despise office politics, yeah, office politics are the pits. They get in the way of the work. When we're working remotely, we don't have that time suck of dealing with the office politics so much. And the work becomes more important. But you have to communicate about the work so that other people know what's getting done. One of the best ways to do this is to establish communication channels. There's two types of communication channels. There's synchronous and asynchronous communication. Those of you who are watching this live are synchronous. We're sharing this at the same time. I'm communicating to you and you're immediately accessing the information. With asynchronous communication, that's the people who are watching this on replay. I'm communicating and at a future point in time, they're accessing the information. I once had a client relationship that went sour because I wasn't respecting these channels. I was living in Costa Rica and running a web design agency. And one of my clients had hired me to do a website redesign. And he sent me a text message one afternoon and said, hey, can we meet next week? I want to go over a couple things. And so I said, sure, how's Tuesday at 4 p.m.? And it took a little while and he texted back and said, no, can we do Wednesday at 10? And I said, no, I've got a meeting that. And so we were going back and forth on text message. And it turned out he was at a waterfall in Costa Rica with his friends. And he had to keep getting out of the water to come and schedule something with me. And it soured the relationship. And we had to do a lot of work to recover from that. Whereas if he had emailed me in an asynchronous way and said, hey, get back to me in the next 24 hours. I'd like to meet you next week. Here's a couple times it worked for me. And I waited until later to respond to him, it would have gone a lot better. Nobody uses the bat phone to ask Bruce Wayne to brunch. That's not the purpose of that channel of communication. The bat phone is synchronous. I need you right now. If you want to send an RSVP card to ask about brunch on Sunday at 10:30, Alfred will handle that in his good time, but we don't need to have an answer right away. And having a clear understanding of your team's synchronous and asynchronous channels will help keep everybody on the same page. Your synchronous channel might be text and your asynchronous might be email, or your synchronous channel might be Slack and your asynchronous channel some other program where you're communicating with each other. And this is a handy chart to figure out, should I be using a synchronous channel for this? If it's urgent, go synchronous. If it's important and it takes some time to unpack it, don't use a synchronous channel. Use an asynchronous channel so that people can take the time to digest what you're saying and craft their response. Reports are usually important and not urgent. And so that would be best delivered through an asynchronous channel, so that somebody can take the time to read through the important pieces of your report and to consider their response. But if there's a fire that needs to be put out, that should go through a synchronous channel, so that people need to know right away what's happening. Synchronous channels are best for shallow work, and asynchronous is best for deep work. And deep work, as defined by Cal Newport, the author of the book of the same name, is professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive abilities to the limit. Shallow work, on the other hand, is non-cognitively demanding, logistical style tasks, often performed while distracted. There's a time and a place for distraction in your life. It's not that one of these is better than the other, because we need them both. Having time for deep work and time for shallow work helps you do both of them. Carl Jung, the psychiatrist from Switzerland, who was he's the founder of psychoanalysis, and he had a thriving client practice in Zurich. And he went there 2 days a week to see clients and talk with them about their issues and help them become better people. A forest retreat. He was founding a new branch of psychiatry that was in conflict with the theories of Sigmund Freud. And you don't go up against Sigmund Freud when you're distracted. If he was trying to do his best work in between client meetings, he would have had a switching cost, going from talking to this person to what's my big idea, to talking to that person, to how do I frame this, and he wouldn't have been nearly as efficient. And instead, he said, I'm going to do all my shallow work here and all my deep work here. He allowed time for both of them. A lot of academics have open office hours, where you can come in and interrupt them and say, hey, professor, I have this question. And they'll answer you because they're available to interruption. But if you try and track them down at a different point in the week, they're going to say, no, I'm working on my book. I'm doing my research. I'm busy. Come see me during open office hours. That's when I'm available. And if you establish time for shallow work, when you're open to interruption, and you can speak with other people, then it'll preserve your focus time for your best work. Because if you try and do deep work while you're being interrupted, you're just going to get frustrated. If you set aside time for shallow work and nobody interrupts you, then you can get to that mythical land known as inbox zero, which is a good thing. We need to spend time processing the mundane tasks. Every Monday, I have an hour set aside in the morning just to do the tasks that I don't want to do the rest of the week. I have this block in my calendar and I call it task time. And anything that is mundane or could get in the way of it's like I got to make phone calls, I got to do this admin thing. I just put it off till Monday. And then I have a block of time where I just churn through that work so that it doesn't distract me the rest of the week. One of the reasons that I can get so much work done is because my wife is a stay-at-home mom. And we homeschool our kids, and they take a lot of attention. And when they want to interrupt a parent during the week, during the workday, they go to mom. If they come in my office, I say, I don't know, ask your mom. So they know, because I've established a clear boundary, that their mom is going to help them. But sometimes my wife needs to have a call or an appointment during the week. So I take my laptop out to the kitchen table. And my kids know that if I'm at the kitchen table, they can interrupt me. I can make them peanut butter toast. I can answer their question about Minecraft. I'm available to interruption. But the only thing I'm doing at the kitchen table is shallow work. I'm processing emails. I'm dealing with the priorities of other people. I'm responding instead of deciding. These are the kinds of activities and goals that we have in shallow work and deep work. And if you schedule time throughout your week when you can be open to interruption, then it allows you to preserve time during your week when you could be focused. But this only works if you establish clear boundaries. You know when your shallow blocks are. You know when your deep blocks are. And once you establish those boundaries, you need to be consistent in defending them. Clear boundaries create respect. And if people push against those boundaries 1 or 2 times and you say, hey, I'm doing this right now, they'll learn to respect those boundaries. But if you're inconsistent in defending them, then they'll learn if they push hard enough, they can change your mind. If your boundaries are unclear, then people will run all over them. Or worse, they'll distrust you. So that when you say, hey, I need this time for this activity, they'll say, yeah, sure, you say that, but I know that if I come knocking, that you'll take my call. Clear boundaries are going to make it easier on you and on your team, and it's going to be stronger communication all around. The whole reason we can play chess is because there are clear, definable boundaries between the squares. Could you imagine the mess that this game would be if the lines were fuzzy? Or if the colors were sort of similar and you could maybe move whichever one you wanted? We wouldn't be able to play. The whole reason we can play this game is because everybody respects the clear boundaries. What Rory Sutherland of Ogilvy says is to batch your calls into a specific period on your calendar. Because if you make calls and you switch to email and you switch to composition and then you switch to another call, there's a switching cost. It's a mental load that happens when you're changing from one task to another. But if you schedule Tuesday afternoons for calls and Wednesday afternoons for emails and Wednesday mornings for composition, then you don't have that friction of changing from one task to another. And you can create more work and be better at it. Whenever you have a meeting, show up on time, because punctuality creates trust. If you always show up 10 minutes late, people will know not to trust you. And this is just one of the best practices for remote communication. I'm going to go through a couple other ones. If you are the bottleneck, make it urgent. If somebody is waiting on you, if the project has come around to you and you're holding the hot potato, get it off your plate right away. Hand it over to somebody else. There was a survey by Panopto, and they found out that we spend an average of 5 hours per week waiting for information. The less frequently you can be that person, the more that people will trust you. A few more best practices for virtual meetings. Whenever you send a calendar invitation, put a quick agenda into the description. Just some bullets. We're going to be talking about this and this and this. And then it gives everybody secure footing on what it is we're meeting for. And it gives them the opportunity to prepare questions beforehand. Like many of you, sometimes I have back-to-back Zoom calls all day. And at the beginning of my day, I look at my list of calls and I write questions that I can ask during each call. So that if I'm on my 4th call in a row and I'm switching from this kind of conversation to that kind of conversation and my head is spinning, I can go and look in my notebook and say, what is it that we're talking about today? Oh, I have some questions so that I can contribute to this conversation. And I do that preparation in advance. If you're hosting the meeting, send out the notes and a recording afterwards. That's what I'm going to be doing with everybody who's showing up live later today. You'll get a link to the recording and all the links that we're sharing in chat. Thank you for that link, Jason. That's going to be great to review. Now, if you've never done agendas before, they can seem kind of intimidating. But the good news is you don't have to use Robert's Rules of Order. You don't have to be really formal about it. You can just look at what's going on in the past, what's going on right now, and what do we plan to do. If you look at it through the lens of strategy, you're looking at why are we doing this? If you look at it through the lens of tactics, you can look at how are we doing this? And every meeting is going to focus on one of these 2 questions more than the other. This might be a why meeting, or this might be a how meeting. And so if you're wondering how to frame an agenda, you can go ahead and screenshot this page. And if it's strategy or tactics, if it's past, present, or future, use this as the heading. We're going to reflect, and here's what we're reflecting on. We're making plans, and here's the areas where we're going to plan. Is this making sense to everybody? Can I see some thumbs? Yeah, great. A little bit? Okay. Well, we're going to get into some more practical notes here. Cornell University did some research, and they found that less than 37% of meetings have agendas. And this is really strange when you consider that the average expense in salary for a meeting is $338. And if I'm going to pay a few $100 to get a group of people in a room, I want to make sure that the time is spent productively. Now, this is a stand-up meeting. It's a typical kind of meeting that happens on engineering teams, where everybody will stand up and say, this is what I'm working on today, and these are the problems that I am anticipating, and these are the people that I need to talk to. Simple agenda. You say what you're working on, what problems you anticipate, and then there's a little bit of brainstorming on who you should collaborate with. And this daily stand-up helps people get that pulse of expectations to understand what's going on the team. But there's something wrong with this picture. Does anybody see the problem with this picture? Go ahead and type it in the chat box. Let me know if you see what the problem is. There's actually two problems. That's the second problem. Thank you, Lisa. All dudes. All dudes. Everybody sees that problem. But there's another problem here that I want to talk about, which is the camera with a group full of people. Totally true, Lisa. They're not engaged. And they're bored. And the reason why is because they're all standing around in a room staring at a TV. It's a group on a Zoom call. Bored because they're all dudes. That's an evergreen problem, right? What they're doing here is they're violating a best practice of virtual meeting. This is a much better stand-up meeting done by Stack Overflow. And every box in green has somebody working in the same building. All the arrows in pink are people sitting at the same desk. They're following the best practice of one person, one camera. If you have a group of people sharing one camera, the whole meeting will be imbalanced. The in-person group can be sharing side conversations that the rest of the meeting can't participate in. And likewise, the individual users will be able to participate more fully in the call than people in a group who are far back from the microphone. And this imbalance is really difficult to overcome. So the best thing that you can do is have one person for one camera in every meeting. A virtual meeting is like a convoy. It can only stay in formation if it moves at the speed of the slowest vessel. But if a couple of fast ships take off in one direction, even if everybody's going to catch up there eventually, you're no longer in formation. People are going to start to get lost. And so you want to stay in formation by doing regular check-ins and making sure that everybody's on the same page. Now, going back to a point we talked about earlier with not being the bottleneck, this is the best way that I know to keep projects moving on remote teams. And there's this website, unlessiheardifferent.com. You can go there and watch the video. It's 3 minutes long, and it's one of the best communication tips I've ever used. And I'll go ahead and spoil it for you right now. If there's a project that's happening in a group communication and everything's moving around and you don't really know what the next step is, take charge, be proactive, and say, unless I hear different, this is what I plan to do. It gives people the opportunity to object or to add to your plan, but you take the initiative to craft the plan and commit to follow through on it. This is the best way to move projects forward and facilitate communication with the rest of the team. I've been using this for years and it's been great. However, something I haven't done is used reply all or involved everybody in a conversation in chat with at all. We're drowning in email nowadays. And the disrespect of reply all reduces the efficiency of everybody on your team. So ask yourself, before you use this function, does everybody really need to be in this conversation? You can even use the previous tip. Unless I hear different, I'm going to move everybody to BCC so that just Jason and Lisa and I can take this conversation deeper. But if anybody else wants to jump in, reply and let me know. So we've gone through a bunch of communication best practices, and now I want to get into the fun stuff, into collaboration. And collaboration is really easy in person. You grab a few people, you get into a room, you throw some ideas up on the board, and you just start jamming. There's nothing like a good in-person collaboration. We can't get that fluency of exchange of ideas in a remote platform, but we can get close. The biggest problem is that we have virtual tools that we have to use as the medium, and people are not as comfortable using these virtual tools because sometimes you have to sign into a new platform or you got to learn a new interface, and it can really be a headache. However, I found that these three options are the best for getting people to collaborate on a virtual whiteboard. There's the Zoom Whiteboard, which we used earlier today. There's Jamboard, which is owned by Google. And there's Mural, which is a standalone whiteboard system. Mural is only virtual whiteboards. That's all they do. But Jamboard, being owned by Google, it's part of a larger organization that has different priorities. Jamboard was actually created as an add-on to their in-person virtual whiteboard, where you could get in a room and use this very expensive piece of hardware to draw on the whiteboard. And other virtual people could also contribute to that virtual whiteboard, and you would see it on your piece of hardware. Now, the good news is you don't have to have this piece of hardware to use Jamboard. And so we're going to go through this today. The host can screen share the Jamboard, but you can also give the link. And so we're going to go through each of these today, and we're going to practice using them. Now, earlier, I shared a whiteboard with Zoom. And you know how when you click share screen, you're given those options? You can share your desktop, which is what I'm doing right now, or you can share a whiteboard, and then it just gives you a white canvas. But you can actually annotate on this slide right here. So I'd like you to do the same thing that you did at the beginning of this masterclass. And I'd like you to open up your annotation toolbar. And go ahead and open that up and use some text to add to the empathy map. We're going to use an empathy map. Oops, wrong slide. I'm having a problem here with Zoom. There we go. All right, so I'm going to add the remote. Oh no, my text is white. Forgive me, I have to come out of full screen for just a moment. There we go. There's this known error in Zoom where when you're sharing full screen, you can't see your mouse cursor. So I have to come out of full screen so I can fix that real quick and then come back to full screen. Here we go. All right. So the persona that we're going to work with is a remote worker. And I'd like other people to, we're just going to do an empathy map game. And if anybody's never done an empathy map, it's where we take a persona and we say, okay, what is this person hearing? What are their pains? What are their gains? What are they thinking and feeling? And everybody just try and add on some text somewhere. What is a remote worker thinking and feeling? What do they hear from their teams and their cultures? go ahead and add some ideas on there. Time to focus. Yeah, that's a big gain that we have. If you're scary news, that's important for sure. Gosh, feeling isolated. Ain't that the truth? Great. Now, if you're having a problem with text, try using the heart stamp and just put some heart stamps on there. Zoom. That's the big thing, right? Great. So what you're seeing here, what you're doing here is you're annotating on a slide. And this is something a lot of people don't know, that anytime someone is sharing a screen, you can annotate on it. So Zoom has this built in. As long as you educate your attendees on how to use the annotation toolbar, you can use Zoom itself for virtual collaboration. Lack of communication, that's good. For sure. Lots of Slack messages. Oh, this is really good. We're getting some really good things in here. Awesome. Great. Okay, thank you for your contributions there. What do we think about the Zoom toolbar? Take yourself off of mute if you want to share your thoughts on the whiteboard. You can press spacebar and hold it down like a walkie-talkie. What do you think about the Zoom whiteboard? Anybody want to share?
I think if everybody understands how to use it, it could be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I think that you've identified one of the biggest obstacles, Feline, which is getting people comfortable in using it. It takes a little bit of training, a little bit of onboarding. Anyone else want to share? Okay. All right, I'm just going to screenshot this because, man, that's such a good empathy map. And I'm going to clear all of our drawings. And then we're going to move on to Jamboard. Oops. Okay, apparently I can't do this full screen. I'm going to take this link and drop it into chat. And I'd like everybody to open this link in a browser window. And if you have problems with accessing this, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can just follow along with me and watch with me if you can't access the Jamboard. But everybody should be able to access it. So I've put a different background on here. This is called the team canvas. And this is an exercise that's done to identify what is our team really about? What are our values? What are the roles we have on the team? What goals do we have? People are already experimenting. Great. Get messy. This is a place for experimenting. I would like to highlight over on the side, there's this button that has a square with some lines in it, and that's a sticky note. So go ahead and write on a sticky note your primary role in your primary culture. What is your role in the culture? Write this on a sticky note and click Save. And after you add this sticky note, you can move it into a specific square. You can rotate sticky notes, you can change their size. I love it when people have trouble identifying roles. I feel that so much. How do I distill down what do I do into one word? That's impossible. Great, great. So the Jamboard is really handy because you don't have to have people sign in to a Google account, but you do have to make some modifications to the permission settings. And what you do is you go up to this blue box at the top that says share, and you change the permission settings so that anyone with the link can edit. And if you make sure to do that, then all you have to do is provide that Jamboard link and people come right in. Great, somebody's put an image in there. Yeah, you can put in images, you can put in GIFs, you can write by hand. Nice. Nice, this is great. What do we think about Jamboard? Somebody come off a mute and tell me what you think about Jamboard.
Yeah. Where has this been my whole life?
I'm noticing like the latency is pretty quick. It's populating from what I'm doing there onto the Zoom like almost immediately. Mm-hmm. And doesn't seem to be impacting, like Zoom isn't buffering or fragmenting or anything. So it looks pretty sharp.
And I work with a pile of designers who won't be offended by the way it looks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a minimal interface, which is really nice.
So mostly, Caelan, basically when you do these kind of collaborations, you would have Zoom open on one screen and the collaborative board on another?
Mm-hmm. And I do it just like I did today. I say, here's your Jamboard link. Let's go over there. I'll keep sharing my screen. So if you can't participate, you can at least watch. And if you can participate, just keep the Zoom on the side and interact with the Jamboard.
And can I ask, do you find it most effective when you have a framework like this, like these two that you've done were like fill in the blank kind of processes? Mm-hmm. Is that something that you do a lot where you create a frame and you ask people to populate?
Yeah, because I find that if you give people that a lot of times, especially when you're just starting in a session, people will get intimidated by the blank page. And they'll say, oh my God, I'm not a writer. I don't know. But if you give them a framework to start from, and you say, here, fill in these blanks, especially during those first exercises, it gives them a little bit of momentum, makes them feel safe in contributing. That's why in the whiteboard in the beginning, you can just write text and do a box. I could have just as easily given you verbal instructions, but giving that framework, I do find it's very helpful to facilitate interaction. Great, so you're welcome to continue playing around on the Jamboard, but I'm gonna drop another link into Skype chat for Mural. And Mural, you do have to sign in unless the host has a paid account. And I do have a paid account, so that gives me the ability, I pay like 15 bucks a month or something, and that gives me the ability to give you a link and you can enter anonymously. If you want to sign into Mural because you have a Mural account, then you can save this to your folder and do all sorts of other things. But you can that anonymity, just being able to click a link and join, I find that to be really imperative in getting people to use it. So there's a bunch of options over here on the side. They've got a greater collection of sticky notes. You can do circles, you can do rectangles, you can bump up the font size on them. And so this is a lot more customizable than Jamboards. Your designer friends, Lisa, they would probably love this kind of tool. I mean, it's got...
I was gonna say, you just made it more expensive for me, but I'll take it.
You can do arrows and shapes. And this has a couple of additional features that are really fun. If you click on the star in the left-hand side, then you can add icons. If you click on the image, then you can search for an image and add that image. I'd like everybody to select an image for your role in your primary culture, your remote culture. What's your role in that? If you were to make it a metaphor, what would that image be? What would the metaphor be? You can add images, you can add GIFs. Zooming in and out is really important in Mural because there are the canvas is enormous. And so you can direct people to this map in the lower right if they get lost. And you can say, okay, next we're gonna do this section all the way on the right. How do we communicate? So everybody move over to there. And then invite people. Everybody add something about something. What do we think about Mural? Any thoughts? Nice, yeah. Oh, that's a good beetle.
Curse you.
A bumblebee, I love it. Great. Okay, so this is just an introduction demo space. Feel free to play with Mural as much as you like. You're welcome to keep adding and modifying things on this board. I'm gonna jump back over to the presentation. And so if you'd like to keep playing with Mural or Jamboard, you're welcome to. Those links are available for you to graffiti up any way you like. But I'd like to review our agenda real quick. We've gone through remote culture, remote communication, and remote collaboration. And these three things I find are really integral to making people better Zoom hosts. And the better you are as a Zoom host, the better culture you can facilitate, the better communication you can have with your culture, and the more likely you can get everyone's communication or collaboration all in one place. When you're a good Zoom host, your energy can guide the group energy. It's your responsibility to provide the exercises that keep people engaged. And I love the Zoom tools, the whiteboards, the screen sharing, the breakout rooms. We haven't really gone into breakout rooms in this presentation, but that's something I go into very deeply during my Zoom host intensive. And that's a program I want to tell you a little bit about, but first I want to make sure we covered everything here. We talked about cultivating culture across continents, how to do virtual meetings and regular reports, the importance of clear boundaries with your team and your family, and we've gone through some virtual whiteboard demonstrations. And so now what I want to do is I want to give you a link to the Zoom host checklist. So I've got to come out of full screen for a second. Oh no, I think I can do it here. Great. So I'm dropping this link to chat. Oops, but it's a cursed mouse cursor. Hang on. Here we go. To everyone, here's the link to the Zoom host checklist. If you're watching this on the replay, you'll see it somewhere nearby. And this is the foundation of a program that I run called the Zoom Host Intensive. It's 6 hours of training that provide a certification in virtual facilitation. So at the end of this 4-session training workshop, you're gonna have it's worth 1 CEU, a continuing education credit, and you get a certification in facilitating Zoom intensives. The cost of the program is $600, but for people who are watching this masterclass, you can use the coupon Masterclass to get 25% off. So you can go to zoomhostintensive.com to enroll. When you're done with this program, you're gonna get a digital badge. And this is a digital credential that's recognized by LinkedIn and the Open Badges protocol. And what's neat about this is it's not just an image, because an image you can copy and paste from somebody else and put it on your site. But embedded in the metadata of this digital badge is the credentials that says that I'm the issuing authority and you, via your email address, is the person who received it. So it acts as a digital certificate that verifies you've done this work. During the 4 sessions, we go through 4 types of exercises and we practice those exercises. We go through 4 types of questions and we role play those questions. We go over the tech and we practice using the tech so that you can feel confident and competent in delivering online meetings. I've been doing a lot of work with agencies and organizations that do face-to-face workshops, and they needed to get into virtual webinars right away. And as I've been working with these facilitators and doing train the trainer sessions on how to lead good Zoom meetings, I've uncovered the best practices that people need in order to really engage. And most importantly, how to facilitate exercises that encourage engagement. The types of people that would really enjoy this program are teachers who are leading a class, coaches with group programs, speakers delivering virtually, and managers, most especially managers who lead remote teams. Keeping your team engaged and aligned can best be done through good Zoom meetings. We're going to talk about how to optimize your connection speed, the best practices for sharing a screen, and what happens when you use different options. We'll practice breakout rooms, we'll practice polls. It's a really in-depth program. And the end result is that you're going to be a better Zoom host. But whether you're in this program or not, whenever you're a part of the meeting, regardless of if you're the host or someone else is the host, the goal is to move together. I was talking with a friend of mine who's in the theater, and we talked about what's different now about theater on Zoom as opposed to theater in the same space. And the big difference is that we're not sharing breath. We're not sharing the risk of somebody forgetting their lines, and we're in the room when it happens. We can create that same sort of connection and community by moving together in unison. When we all went to Jamboard at the same time, when we all went to Mural at the same time, did you feel that community of us moving together? That's what we want to create in our virtual meetings. And the more you can do this, the more successful you'll be at cultivating your cultures online. So the Zoom Host Intensive is at zoomhostintensive.com. That brings us to the end of the masterclass. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes if anybody has some questions, but I want to thank all of you for joining me for this presentation today. Great, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate the applause. How did this go? Any feedback? Any questions?
This was great for me. You've taught me something every time I've ever interacted with you, so I appreciate you very much, sir.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. That means a lot. I appreciate that.
No, it's definitely been impacting my world the last few weeks, so thank you.
Oh, goodness. Wow. That's so kind of you to say that. Thank you.
Sincerely, sincerely, because we're all just trying to figure this out, right? So.
Yeah, right? Yeah, yep. We're all trying to figure this out together.
Yep, we can do it. All right, I'm moving on to the next. I hope you have a lovely Thursday.
You too, Lisa. Thanks. Have fun out there.
Bye.
Bye. Ah, thank you, Hugo. That's great. Stellar is in my name for a reason. Great. Oh, this feedback in the chat is so great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Hi, Sonia, if you're still here. Thanks for coming. This was a lot of fun. There she is, yeah. Sonia herself. Hello.
Hi there. Hi there. Yeah, I was listening more than participating because I've got to have dinner. My role right now is chef.
Yeah.
In the kitchen. So it's dinner time are my part of the world, but I do appreciate your help with the doing the thing with iMovie.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out, but I got it, clipped that video, and yeah, that was very helpful. And your information is always very helpful as I move forward and with thought leaders and everything else going on in my world.
Great. Thanks so much, Sonia. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you've been a great person to watch and to learn from. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.